I have a story before the story. Story of a lady who has a pet duck.
Quack, quack.
Yeah, except one day it didn't do quack quack. It was sick, so sick it wasn't even breathing. So the lady is a little upset, so she takes her duck to the vet and says, "Please check the duck out." And the vet gets a stethoscope, puts the duck on the examining table, listens to its little feathered chest. Nothing, no signs of life. So he says to the lady, I'm sorry, but your duck is dead." And she refuses to receive that. And she says, "Well, can't you do any other tests? Just listening is just one thing." So he kind of looks over his glasses at the lady and doesn't say a word, but he leaves. A couple of minutes later, he comes back with his black Labrador. And the dog sits on its haunches, puts its front paws up on the examining table and sniffs the duck from head to tail feathers. Looks at the vet, looks at the lady, and just kind of shakes its head. Walks out of the room. The vet comes back with a cat. Puts the cat up on the examining table, and the cat sniffs the duck again from head to toe. Looks at the vet, looks at the lady, and shakes its head. No. Cat leaves, and the vet says to her, "I'm sorry, your duck is dead." Sits down at his computer, inputs everything for the bill, prints it off, gives it to the lady. The bill is $550. And she says, $550 to tell me my duck is dead? And he says, "Well, if you would have just accepted my initial diagnosis, it would have been $5. But then there's the lab report and the CAT scan, so that's $550.
Lab and cat.
I'm glad you got it, Max. Way to go.
Meow scan.
Yeah, you got it.
Meow scan.
Well, this entire assembly has been somewhat attacked recently. In the last month, maybe even more recent than that, the last couple of weeks, with intensity of weapons that we've probably not seen for quite a while, or experienced for quite a while. Every one of us is a battle to fight daily. But think of it this way, our adversary doesn't fight us because we're weak. He fights us because we're strong. Because we're strong enough to get his attention and tick him off, because when we're standing fast and firm on God's truth and fighting that good fight of faith, we make an impression in his camp. However, Satan is working extra hard, because he's working at wearing down and separating true believers from following in their walk after Jesus in these last days. And you know what? If we are not mindful, and if we're not really discerning, we may arrive in the midst of all these attacks at a point in our walk with Jesus where we simply resort to being in survival mode. Only concentrating on making it through an hour to the next hour, or making it through the day, rather than counting all things as joy and thanking the Father for a fresh new start of his tender mercies every day. So the message that we're going to share today is titled, "Surviving is Not Enough." And it's gleaned from the Gospel of John. So if you have your Bibles or your Bible apps and you want to read along, go ahead. John chapter 5, starting in verse number 1, right through verse 13. John chapter 5, verse 1. "After this there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is at Jerusalem by the sheep market a pool, which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of impotent folk," not important folk, but impotent folk, "of blind, of halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel came down in a certain season into the pool and troubled the water," stirred the water up. "Whosoever then first, after the troubling of the water, stepped in, was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. And a certain man was there, which had an infirmity 38 years. And when Jesus saw him lying there, and knew that he had been a long time in that case, he said unto him, Do you want to be whole? The impotent man answered him, Sir, I have no man when the water is troubled to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, another steps down and ahead of me. Jesus said unto him, Rise, take up your bed, and walk. And immediately the man was made whole, took up his bed, and walked. And on the same day was the Sabbath. Uh-oh. All the church folk going to say something now. And they did. They said, It is the Sabbath day. It is not lawful to carry your bed. And he answered them, He that made me whole, the same said to me, Take up your bed and walk. Then they said to him, What man said to you to take up your bed and walk? And he that was healed risked not who it was, for Jesus had conveyed himself away, a multitude being in that place. So he kind of disappeared into the crowd. Okay, that's John chapter 5, verses 1 through 13. I'm going to concentrate for this message on verse number 6, because that's the one that really kind of cried out to me. This is where Jesus asked the man who'd been lame for 38 years, Do you want to be whole? Do you want to be well? Jesus came so that we would have life, and life to the full. So surviving is just not enough. Jesus went through all the torment and the trouble and the torture that he did on the way to the cross, and eventually, of course, died on the cross and got crucified, so we could walk in abundance and prosperity in every area of our life. And here's this guy for 38 years, just barely getting by, just accepting what was going on in his life. And that didn't cut it with Jesus. So a little background here about this pool, the pool at Bethesda, that it says was designated for the lame and the blind and those attacked with all sorts of illness. They congregated there, all these infirm, on their porches, just surviving there in survival mode. And you know what? It's a completely paradoxical situation, because on the other side from this pool at Bethesda, just basically essentially across the street, there's just opposite. There's an engagement in life. People are hustling and bustling. It says it's right by the sheep market. So there's obviously business going on. There's people being productive. There's commerce. You know, children are playing. Politics is taking place, I'm sure. All is well. However, on the other side, across the street from that, here's these people stuck on their porches, stuck in survival mode. 5 different porches for different reasons. 5 categories that don't share the same reason, but all share a common result. One man is blind. That's why he's there. One man, it says, is halted. He can see, but he can't move. Another man walks fine. He can see fine, but he's got a withered arm, withered hand. So he can't work. He's not really employable. Invalid, as we heard earlier today. The only thing that each one of them has in common is some sort of illness, some sort of disease, some kind of trauma, some kind of infirmity that has brought them to this place. Now, the pool at Bethesda is also indicative of the times in which the story is written, because at that time there were no hospitals, no medical centers to which these people might be taken for treatment, even possible cure. So this area at the pool with the 5 porches is essentially a holding place for people who were not dead, but they sure weren't alive either. They're stuck in that gray area, not quite able and healthy enough to enter into the business world, which is just really across the street and all that activity that's going on there, but not dead enough to be in the cemetery. So they're stuck in survival mode, and every day that they lived, they enjoyed the fact that they basically had survived the day. They got through it, because in an environment that lends itself to people who have been through a lot of things in their life, a lot of challenges, even some catastrophic events, it's really not uncommon to lose somebody from that crowd, that circle, every day. Somebody could drop off and die. So instead of celebrating the fact that you got well, to some degree, improved, the fact that they just actually made it through another day was celebration within itself. And we need to really understand this, because the text here that I shared in John chapter 5 there, it suggests that there's this pathology evolving around the pool. You know, a pathology that is given to people who survived. So we need to listen to them, and we need to think about our situation. What's going on with us in our lives, because it is possible to develop a mentality to fit the environment that you're in, that simply makes the best of a bad situation. And that's not what God created for us. Somebody once said that most people don't really live their life, they just exist. And God did not create us for that either. But people get to a point in their life where they settle. They've been going at whatever job or vocation or whatever is going on in their life for a certain period of time, and then they get to this level and they say, I'm not happy. I'm not living my life to the fullest. I expected more than this. And then they bring their expectations down to the level at which they are, or their reality. And that's oftentimes what creates a mindset that says kind of things like, well, at least I made it through another day, didn't carry me off to the morgue today. And Jesus came so that we could have life, and life to the full, overflowing with blessings. However, people will live in that negative area because it's been molded over a long period of time. And they're everywhere around us. You hear people all the time, doesn't matter where you go. They'll say things like there might be a married couple and things are not exactly the greatest, but you'll hear something like, well, at least we're still married. Like a default statement. Well, yeah, the crap's going on here, but at least we're still married. Some test of life comes along, there's some loss, some challenge involved, and then you'll hear somebody say, well, at least we have a roof over our head. Never mind that it's caving in and it's leaking and hasn't been painted for 20 years. Thank God there's a roof over our head. Well, some of the torture of this pool at Bethesda existed because of everything that was going on the other side of the street, all the commerce and all the positivity and all the life that was just happening. Because when you're surrounded by that vibrancy and you're down, like, if I'm down and everybody else around me is down, well, then down is the norm. That's your existence. However, what makes down really hard to take is that you can see up just across the street. Because generally when people see something that's beyond where they are or where they are surviving in their life, it'll make them go after the up part. They want that. That's what exposure of these things does for a person. Now, when we read in this text, the pool of Bethesda existed beside the sheep market, not too many of us pay attention to that text, but to me the contrast just jumped out. It shouted at me because I could envision, these herds of sheep coming into the sheep market and they're being bartered and there's buying and selling going on and commerce is existing and business is occurring, life is happening, and on the other side of the street, there's the people picking at their scabs and sores. And looking at this productivity across the street and wondering, well, what the heck happened in my life? What's going on here? And I know we're told we're not to compare. We should never compare ourselves with others. But it happens. We're flesh and blood people. You look at others and you think, look where they are, and look where I am. And it doesn't matter how anointed you are or how gifted you are. It doesn't matter how well you can sing or preach or teach. Just because you're anointed does not mean you can escape this subculture that's going on that can oftentimes develop for yourself a function that will actually hold you prisoner. Preach all you want to, but you can say something with your mouth that if you're not living with your life, there's a disconnect there. So the blind had a porch. One of the porches on where the pool was here at Bethesda was for the blind, and another was for the lame. The withered had their porch. If you want to know where you are in your life, what porch you're on, take a look at your cell phone. Because your cell phone will reveal to whom you're always talking. And whomever you spend your time talking to, that's the porch you're on. You cannot surround yourself with blindness and expect to see. You can't run with groups of angry, resentful, negative women and expect to be joyful and fulfilled. You can't hang out with a bunch of defeated, going nowhere, no vision men and expect to be an overcomer and a champion. You are who you hang around. So what's the name of your porch? No one can run around with hurtful, mean-spirited, sinful people and not become one of them. You can't hang with arrogant, prideful people and not be like them. What's the name of your porch? The blind people all got together on the porch and they spent time together because they could relate to one another. I mean, they could empower one another. They enabled one another. One blind man would say, well, I can't see what's going on. And the other one would say, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. They could relate. Or one would say, well, I can see shadows. The other one would say, I can't see nothing. But they still had this common bond. They built a system of survival for what was not in their life. What would not be there. And you know what? That's exactly what's going on in our societal communities today. Systems of survival built around what will not go away. If we could heal it, we would leave it. But since we can't heal it, we fix the situation up. We make it comfortable. Pour tax dollars into it. Let social services handle it. That's really good too, huh? And you know where that leads? It's a great big mess. And it all results in people just being afraid to even come out of their homes. And nobody likes to live in fear. We shouldn't live in fear. We're told not to live in fear. Can't be afraid to come out of your house. Nobody likes to have their car stolen or their home broken into. Nobody likes to get fired. Nobody likes being broke. Nobody likes being lonely. Nobody likes to be a victim of domestic violence. Nobody likes negativity. However, if we're not mindful, we will build an entire structure and systems around something in which we have lost faith that it could change. And then we have a situation where dysfunction defines who you are. Oh, I am this, or I am that. I am so-and-so. And you end up labeled and locked into this perpetual state of dysfunction, and you develop a survival mechanism to fit what isn't in your life today. Oh yeah, we have porches. There's plenty of porches. I had a 4-door porch once. No. Burned too much gas though. We have porches today. We have hangout spots for whatever you're into. Country is full of porches. The world is full of porches. Many mainstream marketplace churches are porches. Oh, there's survivors there, all right. But is that what Jesus really wanted for us? Or did he say, I have come so that you may have life, and you may have it more abundantly? So Jesus shows up at the pool at Bethesda. He's got his flip-flops on, and he's got his water wings, and he's ready for the water slide. And he looks around, and he sees the lame man lying there. And he wonders how long he's been lying there. So the answer to everybody's question, and any questions ever asked in the world, the answer asks the man a question. You ever think of it that way? The all-knowing, sovereign God, omniscient, knows the end from the beginning of all things, created the heavens, the earth, the galaxies, the universes, from scratch, asks the lame man a question. The God who knows everything about everything asks the guy a question. Excuse me, do you want to get well? Do you want to get well? Now, when I first read this, I used to think, well, that's kind of a peculiar, unwise question for Jesus to ask this guy. You know, why would the all-knowing God ask this man? And obviously, if someone's been lame, or maybe, I guess it wasn't that obvious, but to me, if someone's not been well, or lame, in this case, for 38 years, you'd think they'd want to get well. So why even bother asking the question? So I thought at first, that's really kind of a silly question for Jesus to ask. But then I started looking into that text a little closer and noticed that it said Jesus saw the man lying there on his mat, on his bed. In other words, when Jesus saw this man's behavior, his attitude, he asked him the question because there was nothing in the man's outward appearance, in his demeanor, that indicated that he wanted to get up and walk. He was comfortable in survival mode. So Jesus had to ask the question. And he did. He was checking the man's heart. Didn't want to disturb him if he was enjoying where he was and liking the environment and preferred to just simply exist there, living his life as he was for the last 38 years. He wanted to make sure that that man wasn't just simply surviving. I mean, for 38 years, this man had escaped death. Jesus understood that after 38 years, you could see him, he's still alive. And for 38 years, this guy has just been holding on, doing the same thing, just barely getting by, feeling comfortable in that. So Jesus had to be clear that this guy wanted more than just to survive. After all, he had free will choice, just like we all do. And not even Jesus is going to override that. So essentially, Jesus was telling this man, like he tells us, if surviving is all you want from me, then don't bother praying to me, okay? Because I got way more for you. And if you just want to hang out here, barely getting by, then I don't know that I can work with you. Will you be made whole? That's why he asked him. Or, do you want to get well? You've been like this for 38 years. Are you serious? Do you want to get well? In other words, he's saying, look, you and I got to come into agreement. We need to work together here if you're going to get healed. And that's what happens to so many people today. They curse their own blessings. They curse their own healings because of attitude and behavior and their words. Subconsciously, people will sabotage their own success. There are people who run away from love because they don't deem themselves as lovable. They might be in a relationship, and if anything starts going too good, they will immediately focus on something bad just so they can mess it up. Because they're determined to stay in their bed for another 38 years by the pool, waiting for somebody to help them. Have you developed an addiction to your affliction? Because even God says, I'm not going to take you where you don't want to go. If you don't want to go, can't help you. So let me ask you in here, will you be made whole?
Yes.
Will you?
Yes.
Do you want to change?
Yes.
Yes.
You want to pay attention?
Yes.
Didn't think so. Well, at least you're honest, Keith. Go out and have another smoke.
He quit.
Really?
Yeah,
really.
Well, congratulations. Do you want to be made whole? Do you want to consider that again?
Okay, sure.
Default, right? But you know, that's what we need to answer properly, because I'm sure God has asked you, he's asked me plenty of times, maybe too many times for my own good. Or if you don't want to be made whole, you want to just stay on the porch. And a lot of people say, oh yeah, but you know, maybe we could put some air conditioning on the porch, put a new rug in there. Okay, great, but you're still on the porch. You just decorated it, that's all. So Jesus asked the man, will you be made whole? He looked at that man's situation, and that's the reason why he asked him. So the man must have looked really comfortable and accepting of where he was in that survival mode and was enjoying just surviving. So after Jesus asked him if he wants to be whole, the man says, okay, yeah, I want to be healed, but, I want to be healed, but let me explain a few things to you, Jesus, about my story here. Sit down on the deck chair by the pool. We'll have a pina colada over here for Big J when I tell him my story. And he says, I'm like this because I didn't get what I really wanted in my life. I didn't have anybody to carry me into the pool. It's not that I didn't have the opportunity. It's just when I got the opportunity and somebody budged in front of me in a line, I couldn't get there in time. No one to carry me, nobody to give me cuts in line. And we've all heard these reasonings from people, these excuses. I'm like this because, well, that's just the way I grew up. I'm like this because I didn't have a father. I'm like this because I didn't have a mother. I'm like this because of the color of my skin. I'm like this because of what my pastor said. I'm like this because it was my first husband did to me. And on it goes. Anytime you justify your condition, you have given it license to stay. You have given it an opening, and Satan will put his toe in, and then before you know it, it is a foothold and it is a stronghold. That's exactly why Satan works so hard to beat us down, because when we drop into that negative pity party mode and sympathy seeking acceptance of where we are in our lives and start speaking out those survival mode phrases and words about it, we're trapped there. So the man continues with his story to Jesus and says, and that's part of what I just told you. It's just part of the reason why I am like I am. But there's more, so let me tell you, Jesus. Sit down and listen. A couple of times I really tried to get into the pool, but when I was getting up to go, there they were in front of me. Couldn't make it by me. Now, if I would have been Jesus about it this time, I would have hollered at the guy. Now you go and sit down on your mat and you sleep for another 38 years because there are others who want it more. Okay? And that's why I'm not Jesus. But you know what? That's what we have to do sometimes. If you want it intensely enough, you're going to have to prove it. And that's why Jesus asked the question. He wanted to see where this guy's heart was. That's why he said, will you be made whole? Would you push and scratch and claw your way through the crowd just so you could touch the hem of his garment because you knew that would get your healing? Would you do that? Because oftentimes when it gets down to this, to the nitty-gritty, you can't be polite. You got to say, excuse me, if you don't want this, out of my way, because I'm going for it. I want my healing. I know it's coming, and I'm going to receive from God and what he has for me. Last year I was just simply surviving, but this is my year. I'm going for it. And we have to remember, for 38 years, here's the legend of this. It's in the text that we shared, John chapter 5. It says, every year at a certain time, an angel troubled the waters, came down, troubled the waters, stirred the waters up. Now, if this season came once a year, that means this guy had 38 opportunities, 38 chances to position himself to get into the water. So that means every year he knew it was coming at the same particular time. He had 364 days, or however, the Hebrew calendar, how many days? 360, I don't know. Yeah, okay. So he had that many days to plan for the one day that he knew the angel was going to be there. And what did he do? Nothing. He just sat. It's a little too late when the angel, now you see him stirring up the water. Oh, better go. And by that time, the lineup is formed and you're not going to get there. So he really wasn't in a pre-planned way of thinking. He wasn't ready to blast down the water slide and into that healing liquid, that's for sure. But I think I see one or two at least in here who are pretty darn close to the pool. fact, I know I do see some folks. So God told me to tell you to get ready to jump in, because it is your turn. It's coming. The best is yet to come. Survival is not enough, because Jesus said he wants you all, me, you, all of us, to do way more than just survive. He wants us to all have life big, living large, more abundantly. Not just abundant as in stuff, material possessions, but abundant peace and abundant joy and abundant wisdom and loving kindness and hope and faith. Your destiny was not designed that you would have just a little thimbleful. No. It was designed for you to abundantly prosper in every area of it. Your cup needs to run over with blessings. It was meant to overflow. So if, like the man at the pool, you two have been hanging in there for 38 years, or maybe what seems like that long, the wait is just about over. God has been preparing all of us. He's been training us up. He's been teaching us, giving us all the tools we need to step into the next season of our lives where simply surviving is not enough. We all have to have and live with divine expectations, because if you and I aren't expecting anything, well, guess what? We're not going to get anything. Not a thing. God is such a good God. He's a great and mighty God, a loving God who has set up for those who love and obey him unimaginable rewards. We're told that. No mind has conceived, no eye has seen, no ear has heard of the things that God's laid up for us. So, I don't know about you, but I've gone through some stuff in my life where I'm ready to get into the pool when the stirred up waters are there. And part of the reason why we have to go through some of these things is because God allows some chaos into our lives. It's like Gerald just said here earlier, when God is getting ready or wants to get our attention that we need to change and do something different in our life to get over the hump, well, he will do some things to get our attention. And we need to be paying attention. He will let some chaos go into your lives. He will allow some of the tests and trials. It's the method that he uses to show us that he's trusting us to handle what we have learned in our walk with him and Jesus. Do you really think that when Jesus got on that boat with the other disciples and went to sleep, that the omniscient, all-knowing God didn't have an idea of what was going to happen with the weather? He didn't need the Weather Channel and Doppler radar and the satellite imagery to know what was coming. He knew what was coming. So why then does Jesus go to sleep in the middle of our storms? He knows what's coming way before we even have a sniff of the kind of trouble that's coming. But he'd check out for a while. It seems like, oh, where's Jesus? I really need Jesus here. He does that in the middle of our storms of life because he knows you can handle it. We've been taught enough. We've learned enough. He knows that we can handle it. And I'll prove that to you. In this story of them going across the boat, across the water, Jesus goes to sleep. The storm breaks out. Peter and the rest of the disciples freak out. Now, why? Why would Peter of all people, he's an experienced sailor. I mean, that's his life. That's what he had done all his life. He's a commercial fisherman. He's been on the water plenty of times when I'm sure storms have come up. Didn't affect him at all. But now, all of a sudden, why? Isn't it funny how we can be confronted with tests and trials time and time again in our lives, survive them, pass them, learn from them, and then something comes that's just a little bit different and lost. Don't know what to do. What happened? Our faith reverts to its infancy and we forget everything we've learned. Well, that's what Satan does. Loves to distract us from what we know and what we know to do. That's what happened to Peter. Storm comes, he falls apart. And when people fall apart, they just point fingers and blame others. all the time. Peter wakes up Jesus, and essentially he blames Jesus for the storm and all the hassle surrounding it. What was Jesus' role in this? He was sleeping, didn't have a thing to do with it. Peter is saying to him, Jesus, wake up. You're sleeping. You're letting us down and we're going to die. So now he's questioning Jesus' integrity. Now we would never do anything like that, would we? Would we? So Jesus wakes up in the middle of the storm, rubs the sleep out of his eyes, goes to the bow of the boat and says, peace, be still, and boom, it's quiet. But before he said, peace, be still, he said something else. Do you remember what he said? Oh, you of little faith, you moron. Yeah, that's what the world is made of. Neutrons, protons, and morons. And I have a verification from Pastor Hugh.
It's no official.
Yeah, king of right there. Now, this is what happened. But that was a rebuke. That was a rebuke to Peter. And essentially, he was telling him, you know, why did you wake me up? You could have done this. You had all the discernment. You had all the knowledge. You've got the wisdom in you. Why did you wake me up? Why did you call me at 2 o'clock in the morning? Or why did you call me at 9 and then 9:05 and then 9:10 and 9:15? You know how to do this stuff. What is it about ourselves that causes us right in the middle of a storm for which we are well prepared to handle that results in us getting all panicky and resorting to some kind of infancy in our walk of faith and calling others and waking them up to do what we should be able to do and have been taught to do, instead of just simply being quiet and restful and getting in touch with the Holy Spirit and listening for what it's telling us to do. What we all need to get through what is happening in our lives is not around us. It's in us. Did you get that?
Yep.
What did I say?
He's
Keith?
not.
I don't know, I was preoccupied.
Yeah, I know.
What we need is within us, not that, it's not outside of us, it's in us. That we need to be
Yeah.
overcoming.
Instead of looking around and calling other people and trying to have them figure it out for us, we go to us, the Jesus in us. However, we have an enemy that is focused on distracting us from that truth, and Satan uses every trick to get us to look around at what's going on around us instead of looking at and locking in on who's in us. Have you ever run into people who just know everything about everybody else and nothing about themselves? You know, there are people 40, 50, 60 years of age who still do not know themselves. But they can tell you about so-and-so's pet peeves and why this person says that and why they do that and why they don't do that. They know all their routines. How can anybody live 50, 60 years and not know anything about themselves, what makes them tick? I mean, I can forgive you for not studying trigonometry,
Thanks, Jim.
but not studying yourself, we should. You know? You need to know yourself. How can you expect anybody else to know you if you don't know yourself? That's when we need to slow down and examine ourselves to find out what's in us, because oftentimes tests and trials of life will reveal the depth or lack of depth of a person's character. Pressure either refines us into polished vessels of strength or it just crushes us to dust. Denial will teach you what's in you. Rejection will teach you what's in you. Hard times will teach you what's in you. Yes, Alana.
The way that you view other people tells you what's in you.
Yeah.
Because you see things and you see motives in other people.
Yeah.
that aren't necessarily there. It's the reason you see it there is because that's actually
Yeah.
what's in you.
I heard it said that when we judge other people, when we're not supposed to do that, but when you do judge somebody else, you're not judging them, you're actually judging yourself. You see faults that are in you and you transpose them to the others. But yeah, so when stuff is coming at you, chaos will actually teach you about who you really are. And you can survive it. You can survive it because he who is in you is way stronger than what's coming at you. However, when you are panicking about things, that power in you that can control it is just squandered. It's given away. You hand it over. And you just merely survive until the next attack comes. And it will come because our adversary knows that you're not ready to get off your bed that you've been on for the last 38 years by the pool.
Didn't
That you-
somebody say if I point my finger at you, I got 3 fingers pointing back at me?
Yeah, you did. I just heard that.
Yeah, that was the guy who said, okay.
Robert, I'm pointing at you.
Yeah.
I'm pointing at you.
Well, don't you think that it's best to get in touch with Jesus, he who is in you? I mean, he who created us knows us better than anybody. He knows us better than we know ourselves. And he made us from scratch, from the dust of from the earth. And he's the only one who truly knows us. He's searched your heart. He knows you. He knows your spirit. He knows your soul, your mentality, your discernment. He knows you better than anybody else. So wouldn't it be wise, do you think, to have him in you and relying on him to direct your steps? Move when he says to move, stop when he says to stop. And people will waste so much of their lives because someone told them that they weren't qualified to get a job, or they're overqualified to get a job. Baloney. We can do all things through Jesus who strengthens us. Don't ever allow somebody who's got some university degrees at the end of their name tell you or try to impart wisdom to you when you've got the divine wisdom of the all-knowing God right inside of you. That's who you go to and that's who you ask. You know, God doesn't only know what you did, he knows what you meant to do. You know, he knows the intentions of our heart. He says, I know what you meant. That's why God tells us not to judge anybody, as we were just talking about, Alana, because people will judge you and judge what you did, but God knows your heart. He knows what you meant to do, even if you messed up along the way and it didn't quite turn out the way you hoped and thought it would be turning out. I would much rather be in God's hands than in people's hands. Let me tell you that. You know, God created us from the dust of the earth, breathed into us the breath of life. We became living souls. Not just a living person, a living soul. A living soul means we have self-consciousness. Our bodies give us the world consciousness. It allows us to appeal to our senses, things, smell, taste, touch, sight, all those things that embrace our body, is that we can have the sensations of what's going on around us. Our bodies keep us in touch with the world. In the spirit, we have God consciousness, because God is a spirit. And we're made in his image and his likeness. John tells us that, right? We must worship him in spirit and in truth. So we embrace God in our spirits. We may express God in our bodies, but we know him in our spirit. You can feel God in your spirit. You know when he's in the room. There's no two ways about it. And in our soul or our psyche, and that's where we get that psychology, the science of psychology from, in our soul we have self-consciousness. So when God breathed into Adam the breath of life, Adam became a living soul. He became aware of himself. And this is where the biggest battleground is. Because in a person's soul is amazing power, memory, skill sets, emotions, intellect, individual personality traits. That's why Satan and his demons are after our souls, mankind's souls. You know, on the outside, if it never got inside of you, all that stuff that comes up you, if it just stayed on the outside, we could probably handle that. It may cause us a few problems, but once it gets on the inside, oh boy, that's a battle. That's a tough challenge. And you know, if it's on the inside of you, especially with the devil whispering lies to you in your ears all the time, and his fiery darts are coming at you, it will rattle your self-consciousness. Ships don't sink when they're in the water, they sink when the water gets in them.
I
Yes.
heard it was loose lips sink ships.
Well, that's true too, I suppose.
Big ships.
Where did you hear that?
A long time ago, I don't remember where that is.
Yeah. Well, when we're in the storms of life, or the chaos of life, we can survive. We can. You only go down when the chaos gets inside of you. That's why one of the first things to check out when you get into a chaotic situation is how a person is handling the situation. If it's gotten on their insides, there's going to be some real challenges. Have you ever been in spots where everybody around you is just in scramble mode? They're panicky. They're not thinking properly. But you know, when you're sealed up in that Jesus bubble, there can be stuff going on all around you. People are in turmoil, and you just feel calm and collected, and it's not affecting you whatsoever. It's like being on the ark, although I never was. No smart comments either, but it's kind of like there's pitch within and without. That's why God did it that way. He sealed them in that ark, and there was pitch on the inside, pitch on the outside. That means God put a covering, a double covering on them, so that that ship could go through the water, and the water could not go through it. And it's the same thing with us. He did that for Noah and Mrs. Noah and their children and their wives, because he had big plans for them, and he wanted to make sure and make arrangements for them to carry it out. And we have the same thing with us. God's done that with Jesus for us and through his sacrifice. He's given us pitch within and pitch without, so we can go through things in our lives without them going through us and causing a hassle. God built that protection into us through Jesus. Have you ever been in certain situations in your life that before they actually happened, the anticipation of what was going to come got you a little bit off kilter, a little bit off center, a little bit nervous, a little trepidation, and then you go through it, and a day later you start thinking, well, what was the fuss all about? God was with me all the time it was handled. Why did I even worry about this? Because I survived it. We all do with the Jesus in us. So the next time the storm hits in your life, apply the life lessons that you received from the prior storms. That's when we get to the point of being able to say to that storm, peace, be still, and not be of little faith. You know, back in the book of Genesis, when Jesus recreated the earth, he put within us things to bring forth. You know, he did the same thing with the vegetation, because each thing had the seed within itself. And then he arrives at mankind, and he creates us from the dust of the earth and breathes into us the breath of life. We became living souls. And what's the first thing Jesus told Adam to do?
Go forth and multiply.
Yeah, be fruitful and multiply. That's his expectation for his creation. Be fruitful is God's divine expectation for us and of us. Now, to modernize that, to contemporize that, I guess, that phrase, be fruitful, would be productive. Fruit is produce. Be productive. That's what we're supposed to be. Where Jesus expects us to be productive with our lives. He doesn't expect us to be lying around on our mat for 38 years waiting for somebody to help us into the pool. Just existing, barely surviving. First instruction Adam receives is not, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not wear a white fig leaf after Labor Day. It was none of that stuff. It was be fruitful. Primary expectation of our Creator. He expects us to be productive in our existence on this planet and to be productive for his kingdom so that we can prepare this earth for his kingdom ways and concepts. You and I don't have to ask for joy when we're being productive. We don't have to ask for peace when we're being productive. You're going to be filled with all of those fruits of the Spirit, because when you're being productive, you are fulfilled. You're living your destiny. You're being who God purposed you to be. And above all else, your purpose and mine is to wake up every day, with every breath we breathe, with every contact we make, with every relationship God gives us, with every opportunity he puts in our lives, with every gift he puts in our bellies. We're not supposed to just sit there, lie around, barely surviving. We're supposed to be productive. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be famous. Be productive every day of your life. You realize we'll never see today again in our lives? Never. It's gone at sunset. Done. Yes.
What if we time travel back?
What if we did? Can you do that? Last time you tried that, I think we got the Lemurians on our case. So you first. Go ahead, Hugh. You go right ahead. Let us know how that works out for you, okay?
You have the Lemurians on it?
Yeah, we do. It was quite the story. Better than Doctor Who. Or maybe not.
Well, Doctor Who stories are more interesting, I think.
Yeah. So what did we do with today? What did we do? Were we productive today? Well, we still have some time, an hour or so before sunset. So if we haven't been productive yet today, let's be productive at some point. We'll never see this day again. You know, if you just said, well, maybe I'll just sleep in late. Don't want to get out of bed. Maybe if I had somebody help me, I could get to the pool. Yeah, but maybe not. Maybe I'll just lie down for another 38 years. No, surviving's not enough. Hey, I'm not saying we don't need to rest. Everybody needs the Sabbath rest, okay? God tells us that. But that's one day out of 7, okay? What you going to do for the rest of the 6 days of the week for Jesus? For abundant life, we need Sabbath rest. For maximum capacity, yes, we need Sabbath rest. And we top up the tank and get at it. Go be fruitful for the kingdom. That's God's expectation for us and for our lives. He made us so that every day of our lives, we're supposed to go a little bit further than we did the previous day. And that's at every age and at every stage of our lives. No ifs, ands, and buts. God's expecting us to be productive. Well, it can't be like it was when I was 20. Well, God doesn't expect you to be like you were when you were 20.
Like drinking and boozing it up?
Yeah, well, you can still do that at 67, I suppose, but some people don't change, Pastor Hugh. But he's not expecting that. He doesn't expect you to, he expects you to be like you are at 40, or 64, or 34, or 18. Just because you can't do what you did at 20 doesn't give you a free pass to not do anything at 59 years of age. Just barely scraping by. Because, well, I received another blowfish in my stomach, and Moss is coming in 20 minutes today. Oh, do you want to get well? Will you be made whole? The one who designed you has the right to expect something from you. God's not asking me to do videos and edits and put them on YouTube, because that seed ain't in me, Tim, but it's in you. So I can't produce that level of fruit. So for me to be productive, I have to discern what's in me. And that's about self-discovery. What's in me? What's my potential? That's a question I asked myself a lot, especially when I was younger, because I had a real desire to get into sports, which I did, get into music, which I did. What was I supposed to do with my life? I was figuring out, making it up as I went along. Oh, I did all those things. I had fun. It was a good time. Yeah. I partied. I did all those kinds, etc., 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 etc. But you know what? All the time I was doing those things, there was this something in the back of my head. You know, are you really sure that this is what you want to do? I was living with all the trappings of the world, you know, and that's exactly what they were, trappings. Didn't know it then, because I was caught up in it. I sure do now. But I kept suspecting there was more that I should be doing. Have you ever suspected that there should be something else, a little bit more in your life than what's going on in your situation? Have you ever had that nagging voice inside of you while you're in the midst of hanging out with your buddies and friends, that you're with them, but you're not really one of them?
Had a nagging voice on the outside of me before.
I know. And the ones, you have to be very mindful of the ones on the inside that are saying, I need to get out. But have you ever had that suspecting voice when you're out there doing whatever it is you're doing with your crowd, and it's talking to you, and you know that, yeah, I'm with these people, but I'm really not one of them. I just don't fit in here. There's something else inside of me here that needs to be born so I can be productive. And that's what, like I said, every day of our life, we're supposed to be living in productivity, doing something for the kingdom. There's a reason also that God states, be fruitful and then multiply. Because between fruitful and multiply, there's a moment of discernment. Because in order to be fruitful, you have to be seedful. You have to figure out what the seed is, and then you have to work it into fruit. In other words, if the seed is cucumbers and you're expecting tomatoes, then that's not going to work out too well. Because once the seed is brought to fruit, the only thing that needs to multiply, or we want to multiply after that, is the fruit. Be fruitful, be productive. I mean, I see plenty of people, I'm sure you do too, I see plenty of people multiplying things in their lives, but they're not productive things. Like I did when I was sowing my wild oats. Finding my path. I don't want to multiply my weaknesses and my vulnerabilities. And I'm wrapping this up in a way that, well, I remember, it was about 2-3 years ago, we went to Kenya, Hugh, and we met that out by Amboseli there, the fellow from the army, from the Kenyan soldier.
Yep.
Anyway, yeah, that's, we met this soldier. He was
Stanley.
he was being deployed to the front lines because at that time there was a terrorist group that was causing some problems and really getting aggressive, and they were threatening the Kenyan borders. They were in Somalia. So we were out at that area, out by, what's the mountain again? The big... Kilimanjaro. And they were passing through on the way to Somalia, and we ended up buying him a coffee or a tea in a restaurant, started talking to him, and he was telling us his story about, he was a Maasai, a member of the Maasai tribe, which is one of, if not the only tribe in Kenya that really stays to its roots, its natural heritage roots. And these are warriors, the Maasai warriors. And there's a rite of passage that every young boy has to go through to become a man. About 14 or 15, you have to kill a lion with your bare hands, which he explained how to do, and which he did. And he knew an awful lot about lions. And he was telling me, I think maybe Hugh had left that time, but he was telling me the story about how lions only fight when mating season is approaching. And I said, well, that's a pretty silly way to make love. And he said, no, it's not between male and female don't fight. It's the males that fight because they want to find out who's going to actually be the ruler of the roost or the king of the jungle. And the one who wins the fight, the older it gets, it stays on. And then when a new lioness comes along, the young lions will fight the ruling lion to see who gets to reproduce with the lioness. And of course, if the older lion survives, he wins the fight, he's the strongest, and that lion continues. And this is what he told me that stuck with me to this day, and that's why I incorporated in this teaching. I told you all of that story to tell you that he said that that whole process was nature's way, or God's way, of ensuring weak lions don't reproduce. And I thought, wow, that hit home. Because it fits exactly what I'm saying. The fight of life separates the weak from the strong. Because only the strong survive. And if you're strong enough to survive the fights of your life, the tests and the trials and the challenges, then you can reproduce and multiply your strengths that have been built up on the inside of you. You can be productive, you can be fruitful, and impact those all around you with whom you are in a relationship. So God does not say to multiply what did not survive. He said be fruitful, be productive, and multiply. Once you get through all the chaff, the stuff that remains, the stuff that you had to fight to survive, to learn, to grow, that's what you start multiplying. Get up off of your bed. Don't be lying on it for another 38 years. Grab hold of Jesus and go for it. Live life to the full. Don't merely exist in survival mode. The best is yet to come. You can't reproduce what's already lost. It's gone. Gone. The storms, the heartaches, the pain, those opportunities that may have been that didn't quite work out, well, and when you look back on it, you'll see that God didn't want you to go in that direction anyway. So you had to learn. The things that have been weeded out of our life were done so for a reason. It was to teach us all that what remains is the best of us. And that's what God needs us to all multiply. So get up off your mat and go for it. The angel is stirring up the pool. The Bible says that after you've survived, suffered a while, God will establish you and make you perfect. So when we all finish whining and crying and walking the floor and stomping our feet and complaining about all the hardships that tested you, whatever is left when the fight is over, that's what you take and that's what you be fruitful with. That's what you get productive with. That's what life with Jesus and with the Father in the kingdom is all about. Pressed down, shaken together, flowing over to the glory of God. Because no one can do it without Him. Nobody can do it without His instruction and without His encouragement. So how about it? Will you be made whole?
Yeah.
Yes.
Surviving is not enough. See you in the pool.